Um, so today's topic, it's under a thing, it's called Thinking Like a Boss Through Fear, Disappointment, and Uncertainty. And although it's that's not really correlating with how I feel in this moment, it's just kind of one of the ones that I just picked up and I was like, let me see if this speaks to anybody. So hopefully this helps with someone, but it's called Dialectics of Life, and it says, when I was 16, Jesus gave me a verse that has guided me ever since. Laying in tears on my bed, I was searching through my Bible concordance for a word that might bring me a little inkling of comfort. My boyfriend had just broken up with me, and it felt like my life was over. So desperately wanted to hear from God. I searched that concordance until I found a word, which many years later I can't remember, which led me to Ecclesiastes 3:18. And it says, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, and a time to love and a time to hate, and a time for war and a time for peace. Little did I know that back then how badly I would need this verse in the future. Life never got easier, but I became stronger. I learned what makes the journey of life beautiful is acknowledging that life doesn't need to be happy all of the time, but that we can experience joy even in the midst of pain and uncertainty. Wait, you mean thinking we can experience both joy and pain simultaneously? Yes, difficult seasons don't equate to your life being doomed. There is always beauty to be found in the suffering. This concept was later cemented for me in the graduate school while studying a treatment modality that relied on the concept of dialectics. In a nutshell, this concept states two opposing statements, true at the same time. We can experience joy in the midst of uncertainty, and as Christians, this is particularly true. Our joy cannot be shaken. Even in times of pain and suffering, we can experience deep-rooted confidence in God's goodness and his promise of life everlasting. Romans 5:3-5 states that times of suffering can actually produce endurance and hope if we actively choose to allow them to. I've become so accustomed to the mindset that in times of uncertainty, I no longer ask myself, why is this happening? But rather, how is this working for me, Lord? And it says, I no longer fear the moments of breakdown because I know breakthrough is always on the way. And then it says reflection. It says, where can you find joy in the painful or uncertain season? How is the situation working for you rather than against you? And what is the lesson and beauty that is being revealed in you to you through this painful experience? So I feel like a lot of us can relate to this because these are definitely the last three questions that you need to ask yourself. And I feel like even though some people aren't going through a hard season, like you don't have to be going through a hard season. I hope that nobody's going through a hard season, but sometimes people are. And some of y'all, I know y'all's areas of life right now, and some of y'all are, and so this can really relate to you. And then if not, you can relate back to a time that you went through this, and it can actually give you more hope than what you had even intended for the day. And so what it's talking about is just realizing that even in the midst of pain or in the midst of struggle or in the midst of something really hard, joy can still be found. And so I've talked about this over and over again, so I do apologize if it seems like it's repetitive, but I think it needs to be said over and over again just to remind you that in the midst of anything that you're going through in your life, God is asking you to look through something through the lens of him. He's asking you to look through the lens of, instead of questioning every single move that you're making, which I tend to do, if something in my life isn't aligned with what I thought would happen, I instantly question it. And it's a habit that I'm really trying to break. It's a habit that I'm really trying to break free from and just sit here and say, God, I trust you. And I have noticed along the years and along the months that I have done that, like I've released more control. But a lot of times we have to self-reflect and we have to see, okay, are we panicking in this moment? Are we just being completely irrational and we're just thinking all these fears? And you just start letting these negative thoughts come into your mind of just doubt, fear, all these things that don't serve you, instead of trusting God. And I know that it's a lot easier said than done talking about trusting in God. Believe me, I get it. I'm still going through that. But in this moment, it says that there's like all these different times for certain things. So what I would want you to do is, if you are in, no matter what type of season you're in, if you're in a good season, if you're in a kind of a bad headspace, if you're in just a weird rocky season with maybe a relationship or whatever it might be, pray and ask God to show you what type of release or what type of control you need to give up, or what type of season you're in, and what attitude do you need to have towards that. Because there are seasons where you do need to uproot things that used to be your way of thinking, and I used to think ways of thinking, like only giving 10 minutes to God was okay. And that was because it was in the beginning stages of my faith. But now I had to uproot that thinking and think 10 minutes isn't enough for me. 10 minutes is not going to fill me up. An hour is going to fill me up. An hour is really going to get me going throughout the day. And so sometimes there's ways where you have to uproot things. Sometimes there's things where you just have to stay where you're at and just be grounded in your faith and trust that God's going to get you through that season. Sometimes there's times where you have to shift and you have to move and you have to pivot and you have to do all these different things. And so definitely defining that, and what I've found that's really helped me through these seasons, is journaling out. And y'all, I mean, if you're on my team, you already know how much I literally love journaling. Like, it's my life. And I'm going to write a book one day on personal development and journaling and what it can do for you. But it's something that can allow you to really define what you're going through. And so if you write out in your journaling every single thought that you have, every single anxiety, every single fear, whatever it might be, and then you write out to God saying, God, can you release this? And can you show me exactly what season you want me to be in right now? And can you show me exactly the emotions and feelings? And can you verify that? And little tiny bits, if your eyes are open, little tiny bits of things will come into your life where he's showing you that things are happening for your good, even in the midst of a pain. So I told y'all this past week and this week, these 2 months have just been freaking weird. Okay. And I'm so thankful that we're coming out of July, because I just am so over it. But 2 days ago, I had to take a personal day, and I really had to self-reflect on myself. Okay. Because I was not happy with where I was at. I was not happy how I was feeling towards my team, because my team wasn't doing anything. I was frustrated within myself. So I was giving my frustrations off to other people. I went off on my mom, and she was like, why are you being so mean? And I was like, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm just having a really bad day. I'm getting out my frustrations to other people. I called Dallas, and him and I, like, he just let me vent to him. Okay. And so sometimes you have to have those days, but then I had to realize I had to self-reflect, like, really, really deeply, really hard, really emotionally, and just ask God, what season is this in my life, and what is he using this for? And it wasn't like I was like, God, why are you doing all these things to me? It genuinely was the question of obedience of, what are you teaching me in this moment? And if you change your perspective into every single thing that happens, you're like, God, what do you want me to learn from in this moment? What do you want me to learn from in this moment? And what I'm going through now slightly feels like what I went through last summer, for the 3 months that I was going through my depression. And it's not that I'm depressed, but it feels like kind of the same season. And so I know that instantly gives me perspective of, okay, I didn't learn something last time. So God, what are you teaching me in this moment? Like, what exactly do I need to learn? And that's kind of what I've been doing, is I've just been a student. And someone on my team yesterday called me, and we had a really hard, long, awkward conversation. Okay. And it needed to be had. But they pointed out some things to me that they needed to see that I needed to adjust. And having those people that will give you critical feedback, but in a good way. So what is that called? It's like on the tip of my tongue, something that's like constructive criticism. And that's what it was. And she was telling me ways that I had hurt her, and I had no clue. And she was telling me ways that I felt that she felt like I was abandoning, and all these different things. And I had no clue, you guys. And in that moment, I instantly just like thank God. And I was like, God, this is a moment where you're teaching me how to break through this. And this is something so little yesterday, but yesterday I was at the park, and please don't judge me for doing this, but I was at the dog park, and this woman with her 2 kids, we were like just talking, and we had our dogs out, and she was right beside her car, and she was like, I know this is really random, but do you want a coffee? And she's like, my sister was supposed to meet me here, and she can't last minute. And I don't want the Starbucks coffee to go to waste. She's like, you totally don't have to. And she's like, I know it's kind of random, but do you want a coffee? And I was like, absolutely. I freaking love coffee. Like, of course, and some people are like stranger danger. And I'm like, no, like sometimes I'm weird about that, but in this instant, I wasn't freaked out about it. But in that moment, it's something so little, and it was a sugar-free vanilla thing. And it's exactly what I get from Starbucks. And so in that moment, I know that like coffee isn't God. Like, I understand that, but in that moment, it was just like this little brief reminder that God is like getting me through these things. He's teaching me to be aware of my surroundings and teaching me to be present in the moment and being grateful and thankful for the little things in the moment. And I read this post today, and this is going to be totally off topic, but it's totally fine. So I read this post today on Facebook, and it was talking about how in the moments, like, when you first get married or when you're in your first stages of life in your 20s, don't try to live like you're 60. Don't try to compare like you've been married for 30 years. And they were talking about how so many times we get these houses and we have this vision of what we want, and we're too ashamed to share what we have in the moment because it's not enough in what we want. And so it's really funny to think about this, because I talk about gratitude all the time. I talk about gratefulness. I talk about how thanking God for the moment and being present in the moment. And yet I was so ashamed for my family to come over to my apartment because I hate my decorations. And in that moment, it was when I read that post this morning, it was saying like, you're so upset with the decorations and the home decor and the things that you have now, but you're just not to that level to where you can sit here and refurnish a home. And you're not to this level where you can sit here and get years and years and years of people giving you things and creating this beautiful home. You're in an apartment, and like, that's literally like what I was comparing myself to. And I was like, oh my gosh, this whole time I've been like so ashamed and telling Dallas how after the wedding, I just wanted to refurnish everything. And financially, I could, but financially it wouldn't be the smartest decision. Okay. So it's like I could, but like I have other goals in mind too. I'm saving for a dream home next year and all these different things. And it just brought me in the moment. And I was like, this whole time I've been complaining, and God has told me to be grateful. And I've been telling other people to be grateful, but yet I'm ashamed of my own home. And it's not like an ugly, it's a cute little home, but it's not what I want it to be. And it just brought me down, and I just like instantly just had to self-reflect. And so it just, there's literally in the past like 3 days, I've self-reflected so many things that I needed to work on. And it has been a biggest blessing. It's been the biggest eye-opener. There were things that I didn't even realize I was doing to my team, that I was not serving them in ways I should. I was being selfish in some ways. I was being too hard in some ways. I was being, there was just so many breakthroughs within myself. And then in my relationship with Dallas, like, there were so many things that I was like, God, you're trying to show me my breakthroughs of things that I didn't know last year. And now I see it clearly. And it's not that I'm all the way out of the storm. I'm not at all, but I am getting through it. And that's the part that people need to see, is even in the midst of a storm or in a place in life that you just don't quite understand, you're still walking through it and you're having breakthroughs along the way. And I think that so many of us, it's so valuable to see and realize and kind of evaluate and self-reflect and see what type of season you're in. Respect that respect that season. Don't think of it as something that's coming to attack you. Think of something that it's going to help you through. Okay. And so I don't know, like, it just, yesterday was like, it was a good day because I had breakthroughs like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's so funny. Like, you think that you're doing all the right things, and then you have someone tell you something and you're like, that's crazy. I've been doing this all wrong. Like, I've been confident. And sometimes it's because I was so confident in those areas, I didn't pray over those areas. I didn't pray over my leadership or like the specific areas in leadership of which I needed to have patience with my team and have kindness with my team. I didn't have like pray for those things. I was praying for, God, bring me people who want this. God, bring me duplication. God, bring me this. Bring me this. But in this moment, he's like, sister, you have to work on you before you pray over anything else. Like, you have to pray over you and sit here and pray over your heart and work on you before you sit here and start putting the blame on your team. And that's where I just really self-reflected. And then I was like, wow, I'm really grateful for my team that I do have, even though sometimes I complain because I'm like, they're not showing up in the chats. They're not doing this. They're not enrolling. They're not showing up on the team Zooms. They're not doing this. And it's so quick to point the finger. But, you know, when they say you point the finger, you have 3 pointing back at you. That was me. That was so me. And so I had conversations, really hard conversations with people yesterday, but it was a good conversation. It wasn't like a breakdown. And it just made me realize that I needed to be less selfish and, you know, care for others and stop putting myself on this high horse. Even though I'm really hard on myself, I still put myself on this high horse thinking, oh, I've been through that before. I've already been through that. I don't need to go through that again. And God's like humbles me really, really quickly. And he might humble you to realize, like, girl, you ain't even halfway done growing. Stop thinking that you can start being dependent on your own, because you are just, it ain't gonna happen. You always have to depend on me for something, some way, somehow. And that was my breakthroughs. And so hopefully that helps, because I think that again, being honest, saying that like I have flaws and I just realized some of my flaws that I never really realized before is a good thing. And some of y'all would be like, it kind of discourages me to think about like my flaws that I have. And no, it's always for your good. You want to know what your flaws are. And I don't mean physical flaws. So when you're saying physical things, that's not what I'm saying. This wasn't anything physical. It was genuinely emotionally, it was heart filled, it was all those different things. And so when you have those breakthroughs within yourself, then that's when the growing process really starts. And I'm so excited today to have the conversations that I'm going to have today with my team in a caring state, not in a selfish state, and in a state where I can be like, okay, let's rise together. Let's not sit here and let me ask you about your life because I genuinely just want to know how your chart is. Like, like it was just things that I don't know. It was a hard look at myself, but it was needed, and it was a breakthrough that I had. I'm sure I'll have many more along the way, but that's kind of what season I'm in. So I know that in this season there's breakthroughs happening, and there's one thing that I need to release is control. That is one thing that I 1,000% need to release, and let my leaders be them and let my team do them and help have them come and ask questions. And so I don't know, there was just so many good nuggets yesterday, and y'all can ask me about them if y'all have personal questions, but that is what I learned, and hopefully that helps someone. So I'll stop this recording.